Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kay. Today I'm going to be doing a spoilery review for The Shadowed Sun by N.K. Jemisin. This is the second book in the Dreamblood duology, and I did do a spoiler-free review a few days ago, but I wanted to be able to go into some more spoilery details about some of the things that I really loved about this book, but also a couple of things that didn't necessarily work the best for me. Not to say that they were done poorly or anything like that, but that just didn't live up to, the rest of the book. So first thing, I will start with the very kind of few small quibbles I have with this book. Mostly it has to do with the beginning. So I said this in my spoiler-free review, but it took a little while for me to get into. I had the same issue with The Killing Moon. With that one, I assumed it was the magic system because the magic system in these books is a little confusing and odd. I hadn't really come across anything quite like it in any other book, so that was a little confusing. And then the names of the places and the names of people I don't know how to really pronounce them. And I do believe these books are based loosely, kind of inspired by Egypt and Egyptian culture, and that might be why I'm just not familiar with kind of the names of things. So then it gets a little difficult to remember who's who, especially if names are kind of at all similar. So I assumed that was the problems I was having with the first book, but then when I picked this one up, I was having the same kind of thing where I wasn't super compelled all the time to pick it up and get through it. And it did take, I think, about 100 pages before I finally got into it enough and started getting attached to the characters and invested in the story. And I'm not entirely sure why, because obviously I understood the magic system by this point because I just read an entire novel about it. So I understood the magic system well enough. There were a few familiar characters from the first book, but other than that, most of the characters in here are new. But there weren't so many that I was having trouble keeping track of them, simply because their names were all different enough that I could still keep track of who was who. It just took a while, and I'm not really sure if it was the pacing, if the story just starts off very slow, and I'm not really sure. But that, I think, was the biggest thing that I had with this book as far as a negative goes. I did also, it wasn't necessarily a problem, but at the end, Tynette, I think is her name, she is the nobleman's daughter. She just kind of like wanders off. Her daughter dies, she kills her father, and then she just walks off, and then it never really says what became of her after. And I would have liked to have gotten maybe a little peek at where she ended up, like we did with Wanahome and Hanani. There was kind of a little flash forward or whatever, and I would have liked to have gotten that for her too, because she was a point of view character. I at least was invested in her story just because her storyline was so shocking to me when I read that first chapter from her point of view. And it's revealed at the end of the chapter that her father is molesting her and has been for years. That was very shocking. I wasn't expecting anything like that. And then to find out later on that Tantufi is actually her daughter, not her sister, and then Tantufi dies. I really wanted to see how she came out of that. I mean, I can't imagine that she was in a great place mentally, but I would have liked to have seen her at least start to recover from it or something. But we don't really get any sort of closure for her character. She just finally gets rid of her father, gets him out of her life, and then just kind of wanders off and is gone. So I think those are kind of the main issues that I had that I would have liked taken care of. Like I said, I'm not sure what took me so long to get into it. I can't point my finger at any specific thing, but I did have that issue. But definitely with Tina, I think she could have been, I just would have liked to see a better ending for her, I guess, maybe. Not necessarily like a happy ending, but just, some closure with what happened with her. So I think those are kind of the only things I really had problems with. Now on to all the things that I enjoyed. So, like I said in my spoiler-free review, I liked the romance in here. It was a very kind of subtle, slow burn thing. They go from hating each other to kind of grudgingly respecting and tolerating each other. And then they become more of like friends and lovers type of thing. But there's no, especially as far as Hanani is concerned, no like deep romantic connection, partially because I think she just refuses to allow herself to go there, but he is a comfort to her after the death of her mentor. And it's only then later then that they kind of really explore the romantic side of things, and they do end up getting together, which is lovely. But yeah, I enjoyed how the romance was handled, because they kept their own goals in mind. They still had their own path that they wanted to follow, and they didn't it didn't get all tangly and messy and like oh, I'm gonna make this decision because it would help me get the girl or anything like that. So I did enjoy that, and the fact that Hanani was willing to just walk away. She didn't feel that she belonged in the Hedwa anymore, and didn't want to just be Wanahoman's wife and, you know, live in a palace cooped up somewhere. She went back to the Bambara tribe. She wanted to help people, and that's what she did. She carved out a space, you know, made her area there like a neutral ground so that any of the people from any of the tribes out in the desert could come to her for help. And despite the fact that she did love Wanahoman and he loved her and everything like that, she still made that decision for herself instead of just kind of buckling to whatever he needed. She took care of herself first, and I really appreciated how that was done. Somebody that I did not mention in my first review is, I think her name is Yanasa. She's one of the Bambaran women, and she was actually one of my favorite characters. I really, really liked her. I initially thought that she was going to be this, like, catty, nasty character who was just being kind to Hanani to her face, but then using it to her advantage in some way, and, you know, trying to look out for number one and not really be a friend to Hanani. But that theory did not bear out, and I was really happy with that. She was a really good friend. It was nice to see some women friendships that were honest, because Yanasa does not, you know, sugarcoat things for Hanani. She tells her how life is in the tribe and why life is the way that it is, and she does genuinely help her and care about her. And so then when Hanani goes back, she's able to kind of cultivate that friendship further. But she also, like, when she originally left, she left her things to Yanasa, and you know, and helped and kind of returned the help that Yanasa had given her. And I really liked that kind of friendship that they had. And then you have the relationship between Hanani and Wanahoman's mother, whose name I cannot remember. But that was kind of an interesting female dynamic as well, because it was definitely different. You had this kind of grudging, not necessarily respect, but like Wanahoman's mother knew, we have to make sure that the sharers are taken care of, because you need this alliance, despite the fact that Wanahoman's like, I hate the Hedwa and I hate all of everyone, and his mother is like, no, you need to stop and you need to think about, you know, what's going on as far as like strategy goes. We have to take care of these people, we have to protect them. You need this alliance, and despite whatever, you know, feelings you're having, you still need to think strategically, and you still need to, you know, make sure that this alliance is maintained. And I think even then towards the end, you see his mother and Hanani kind of warm up to each other by the end of it, and that was nice. And then, of course, she ends up, you know, that's her mother-in-law now, so also helpful. But it was good to see some of the female-to-female relationships, just because at the beginning Hanani is so isolated because she's chosen to walk this path as a sharer and basically has to constrain everything about herself in order to do so. And then at the end she's able to, you know, live the life she wants to live and how she wants to live it. And she's able to create, maintain and create these friendships that she didn't really have before, because before, I believe, the only real kind of close relationship she had was with her mentor, whose name I'm not even going to try to say because I can't. But that was really the only close, meaningful friendship she had. And even that was kind of strange because he's her mentor, and male and female friendships, especially within the Hetwa, there's rumors of oh, are they lovers or what's going on? So he's distanced himself from her, especially physically. There's no physical affection once she, surpasses a certain age and she's no longer really a child anymore. So for Hanani to be able to kind of cultivate these other relationships and friendships outside of the Hetwa, and kind of build a little found family for herself, I was really happy with. The overall plot, as far as the wild dreamer being Tantufi, was interesting to me, just because you have this child, and I'm not sure, it was never explained fully, I don't think, or maybe I just didn't pick up on it, but what was going on with Tantufi, I think maybe she had too much of the dreaming gift, because it was coming from, I guess, both sides of her family, sort of. I'm not really sure, but I guess maybe she just had too much. And I wonder if that had been discovered, or anyone cared early enough that if she could have been taught to control it or something, so that she would have been able to live more of a normal life. Her story was extremely sad, and it was very difficult to read, just because they talk about she's emaciated and malnourished, and she's had so many broken bones and all these injuries inflicted upon her by her father, and it's just incredibly sad. And then in the end, the only way that Hanani can even help her is to help her die. And that was just really sad. It was kind of, it was too bad that was kind of the way that it went. I mean, like I've said before, I do appreciate there being consequences and characters dying and things, but whenever it's a child, it's always obviously difficult. But I think it was handled very well. It wasn't oh, she was evil and we had to kill her. It's no, she was a scared and hurt child, and this was the only way to help her, because she was living in torment every single day of her life. So this was the only way to help, because the damage was just too much. And the fact that Hanani was able to reach her, because on some level she can connect with those feelings, because she was kind of given up by her parents, by her own choice. I mean, she did it voluntarily, I guess, but at least as a young child and growing up, she always just assumed that they didn't care, and they were just yeah, go. Rather than being able to step back and see oh, they must have cared for me quite a lot to let me go to the Hetwa, rather than selling me and being able to get a lot more money, just selling me to somebody else. They allowed me to go to the Hetwa. They took less money because they did actually care. But she was able to tap into all of those emotions that she had from being a child, and then from growing up, and trying to be a sharer, and then everyone just kind of shutting her out and treating her very poorly, all the men within the Hetwa, telling her she doesn't belong and things like that. She's able to tap into all those emotions and kind of connect with Tantufi and get past the monster that was really just a defense mechanism, and connect with this little girl and see her for what she really was, and Wana Homan helped with that, which I also appreciated, that he wasn't just there to be the prince to come in and save the city and whatever. He was actually able to help Hanani and remind her of who she was. I felt like a lot of the relationships and the emotional side of things were handled extremely well in this book. Wana Homan has to come to terms with his father and who his father really was, and kind of take off those blinders and see oh, he did not have my best interest at heart. He didn't really care about anyone else but himself, and he was willing to sacrifice so many people just so he could be immortal and be in control of everything forever. And that's not honorable. That's not, being a good person, whatever. So I felt like a lot of the relationships and kind of emotional baggage that everyone seemed to have was handled very, very well, and that to me was kind of the best parts of this book, and is really a lot of the reason why I gave it 5 stars. I did read on, I think I read on Twitter that N.K. Jemisin had like a hard time getting this book published or something. And that it was intended to have at least, I think, one more book or something of that nature. There's going to be more in this universe, but things went so poorly, it kind of just sucked all of the desire to mess with it anymore kind of out of her, which is unfortunate, because this is the favorite series of hers that I've read, and I liked it more than the Broken Earth trilogy and 100,000 Kingdoms. And my neighbors are being loud. That's nice. It's like pouring rain outside, so I thought I'd leave the door open and, get some airflow and hear the rain, and now my neighbors are outside being irritating as usual. At least their dog's not barking. Anyway. So, I think that's really all I have to say about this book. I definitely think anyone who's enjoyed her other work should definitely read this. Anyone who enjoys, obviously, like, good world building and especially good character development and things of that nature, anything to do with characters, I think would enjoy this book quite a lot. That's great. That's great. Anyway, so that's all I've got for today. Thanks for sticking around. Like and subscribe down below if you want. Leave a comment if you have read this book and tell me what you thought about it. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!